I don't know if this will go anywhere because I'm freezing. I did come back out. I had 2 apples. They were delicious. It is super late though. It's 12:30, so it's after midnight. The only thing that brought me back is the prospect that I could almost be done soon. I could almost be done writing this first stage out, or dictating rather. And so I'm considering just trekking on, starting with where I left off. So I was just going over what I had written down. A few things here, topics that I wanted to get into. So I just wanted to kind of mention or note how it was kind of a bit of an out of nowhere dive into some of these aspects here, as well as, and this is where the holoculture database, that terminology came from in the context of that old writing piece, 2 years old now. Mapping the mind simulation and how to save the worlds. So we got a bit into an aspect of Illuminati networking, which is in the form of the holomimetic superconductor project, or what I'll call like the superconductor protocol, probably something like that. And what this is to set up concentration nodes of high availability, wide and deep if possible, of culture, and as kind of concentration points within your neck of the woods, and then of course the intentionality and the connection, the global connection, the global context, the world, in other words, to connect these together and share culture. So here we're looking at bootstrapping of the it was called some things that I didn't write down. I think hollow nerve was one of the words that I mashed together. So what we're talking about is a global neural what to call that? Global neural network? No. Anyways, so we're talking about a global context for culture to share, kind of like how what the internet has done as far as availability and quality of information. Same thing can happen. So we're talking about mimetic selection of behavior, uptaking into the operating systems, selecting isomorphic artifacts, collecting them in databases such as this one, either on index card or using dashboard or AO software. So where is that coming from? I guess I could try to point to an aspect of this, of Portal Mountain, which is that it's self-contained and it's self-replicating. So in other words, mimetically selected. So as I was speaking about the MPG, the mobile portal generator, this is an example of a protocol set and all this bootstrap and the strike point domain of this expression so yeah, like the question, what is the point of it, and how does it work, or what does it do, and just iterating and iterating, eventually you slowly get a picture. It's like painting a picture. But one of the keys here is mimetic selection. So this is how it goes from one person to the other. This is how the fundamental guild is taught or transmitted. It's being done within the context of models of this behavior itself being put together and utilized to bootstrap. To do the bootstrap. Okay, people walking by with pizza, nice. 5 floors down. She's walking really slow, he's fast paced. She's got some kind of tiny purse. Anyways. He must be hungry. So so a lot of these descriptions and the way that I talk about things are coming out of experiences that I've had, and I may not necessarily be giving that context. So like finding the others and connecting together and connecting this kind of like, I don't know, you don't find a lot of people who consistently do not breach constraints in certain ways, which is hard, which isn't really describable in a positive statement. Anyways, as I've gotten into that before, that's the coherence protocol details. So here's a concept. I shouldn't say that in the technical sense. So here's a type of behavior which I've articulated in the past and I've utilized in the past to try and think about stuff. It's this idea called critical activism, and it means that if you feel like you should be taking action, doing behaviors, there's a critical aspect of it that you have to be critical of what you are doing. Seeing, is this really making a difference? Is this really going to change anything? And often the answer is a sad no, but that leads you on a journey to continue on, or continue your journey to find some meaningful behavior, some way to get your agency back, your ability to affect, your ability to set up the outcomes that you're looking for. So that's critical activism, and that's the context in which I can describe Illuminati networking, which is simply just kind of like a joke or whatever to point to that we're claiming mastery level knowledge or whatever in certain areas, and that it's not very common to see. So therefore, to bootstrap such a system as I've been describing here really takes a very it takes a lot of support from the network. Otherwise it never gets off the ground. So I think I've pretty much gone over everything so far there. Okay, just going through the list here, I have a note here about the Coalition of Invisible Colleges. So the Coalition of Invisible Colleges is a meta-organization. It's the meta-organization, just another manifestation. It's a claiming to be representative of the meta-organization. That's the proper way of stating it. The Coalition of Invisible Colleges is so maybe you could look at this as the aspects of the body, in that there are different parts do different parts. So the Coalition of Invisible Colleges is like other meta-organizations, and it just so happens its one and only purpose or specialty, which it in particular was programmed with or bootstrapped with, is the indexing and collecting and connecting together of other organizations which also claim to represent the meta-organization. So this is, in other words, a directory, a connection point. We have a website set up for it. I think it's just coalitionofinvisiblecolleges.org. Hasn't been updated recently, but this is in the works. As everything is. So I still, just on my notes here, I haven't gotten to the axial age stuff and the cybernetics. I didn't really want to say too much about that, maybe. I think I already have, to some extent, but who knows, maybe I can go over that some more. Okay, so the global stateless holomimetic nervous system. There's that. Okay, I'm just going through a note card right now, and just seeing if anything is relevant enough to deem itself a little piece of section here. This is also an opportunity to bring up a protocol I don't know if I've been completely following, but related to the strike point protocol, with the unfolding of the web of meaning, with the unfolding of the APS in this domain, with the unfolding of this domain of the APS. Getting cold, getting tired. Where did I want to go with this? So I'm just looking through this card. There's like not much. Okay. So there's a few protocols here. Right, so I'm just looking through the card, seeing if there's anything worthy of making a section, and that brought up the other idea about the strike point protocol, and one of the aspects of it is how you have sectioning. So I brought up not subdomain, but a substrike. So these are intentional like subsections. And again, this is how the strike point proceeds. This is how the arc proceeds, or how the unfolding of the domain proceeds, through which we have in the interpreter these arcs being formed. In other words, meaning, hopefully in the intended transmitted meaning of why this was articulated. So in here we're finding just a couple things I wanted to bring up again. So superconductor protocol, we know that. The database iteration protocol, we went over that one as well. and we have here a Canvas protocol. So the Canvas protocol relates back to, again, critical activism as well as Illuminati networking, as well as, interestingly enough, the database iteration protocol. So the Canvas protocol, I believe it's called Canvas, is instructions for canvassing a neighborhood or canvassing any particular community. Basically, you're trying to make a connection with as many people in an area as possible, and you're trying to bootstrap and kickstart the proximity guild networks. So this is the purpose of the Canvas protocol and many different related protocols potentially. For example, how are you connecting your community together? What kind of services can you offer to each other? Or even like collecting this type of information. These would be various different protocols for making perhaps general proximity guilds out of neighborhood connections. Perhaps we could say it that way. So last on the card here, I have speaking concretely, and I have another yellow sticky pad with some things on it, I think, which I wanted to go through before I'm done with this speaking, so there may be still some more. But I wanted to speak as concretely as possible in this last kind of stretch here. So what I mean by that is really speaking into the projects, the concrete relationships, the things that I'm doing, the proximity guilds, which are most important to me as far as my work ongoing. And so I intended to formulate some expression catered to so in what I just talked about, so my research and development in the Christian small group context, as far as its relevancy to general proximity guilds and or other types of proximity guilds or guilds. So that's one kind of area, and that's interesting to a number of my church family colleagues, you could say. So that's relevant to that kind of group. I mean, it's core to the work of the guild as well, or of the modeling. So how people work together in small groups is really interesting. And I think relevant and significant for a lot of people who would find this interesting. The other is, as I mentioned earlier, the Alphabetica crew. So that would be like stuff I already mentioned. In particular, the context of the Great Axial War and its ongoing manifestations. Okay, next kind of context or direction is the SOTS subreddit. So basically I would again be trying to answer what is the spectacle, or what is abstract phase space, and probably at the same time making fun of what is the sorcery of the spectacle, what is it. But I may be actually inclined and furnished with the ability to at least give a straightforward definitional type of what is SOTS. And I'm just thinking, because sorcery is known, spectacle is known, so I can lay out practically automatically some some ideas for what might be the delimiting, based on just the name and what's said in the description, or as well as my own analysis of how the community has progressed and what it's done, and that kind of deeper meaning of the spark and all that, which I've alluded to many times. So I'd like to speak a bit more about that for relevance to the SOTS community. I hate talking about politics, identity politics, anything like that, isms, groups of people. It's just annoying and exhausting for me to keep track of all that garbage. But anyway, there's some other themes in SOTS, you could say. Some themes that I like to bring up sometimes, like liberal versus conservative as two sides of the same coin. In fact, we can use that dichotomy, that false dichotomy, to show what the danger of the crusting of the APS is on the conservative side, the conservative pitfall, and what the danger of reckless abandon of constraint is. And there you have the liberal, the pitfall of the liberal. So both are forced away from each other, when in fact what the model would be describing is a harmonious interaction so between the forces of calcification or crusting up, which is biologically advantageous in most cases. It takes less energy to do what's always worked, but there always comes that time where change happens underneath our expectations and our models, and they fail. So this is where conservatives fall, even though they are strong in the constraint sense, most often normally by a virtue of tradition. It's went dead silent on the highway again, which is neat. That's a longer silence than before. I can hear some cars somewhere. Oh, yeah. There we go. So for SOTS, I'd like to point out that left-right false political dichotomy, which is retarded, and also get into politics itself, which is, and for the reasons for which it's retarded. In the context of the model, utilizing the model to help explain the disconnection of the loop, the broken loop, which is typical and causes this dysmorphisms, compensations. This is maybe it's a protocol, the compensation protocol. So anytime we see dysmorphism, or we're noticing that something is constraints being breached, often we find what we have is a sort of compensation, so some kind of hack together of behavior just to keep going. And this is what's attempting to drive isomorphism. So a problem has been noticed, a constraint breach, it's obvious, but you don't know how to fix it. And you do some stopgap thing, and then you just keep doing that always. And things maybe not coming back to smooth operational order as they should. So anyways, I'll probably want to go over some common thoughts, themes, stuff that the sub-themes or tends to be interested in, or my common takes, just the takes that I've had on certain ideas or subject matters, like accelerationism, which suffers the same problem as liberalism in general, that reckless abandon of constraint, and yet that such freedom in freedom it's kind of funny or interesting to think of as a dichotomy. So constraint, freedom and constraint, I think, are often perceived as opposite, as against each other. But there is also really a freedom in maintaining constraint, because this is towards health. This is towards optimization. And when you're healthy and optimized, your possibility, your imagination of possibility, your actual capacities are increased. So it's, yeah, there's a battle, a really petty battle that's gone on between left and right leaning thought, and this has been just a huge cognitive wedge driven in and perpetuated by broadcast media, which is created outside of the context of the strange loop. So in other words, in a broken loop, with specific objectives, with specific purposes, with work motivated by the mediation of monetary, of money, of currency. So anyways, that's accelerationist left-rights, and the idea of capital itself, I guess, I don't know, I don't think about that one too much, even though I was into like crypto biz long time ago, crypto town stuff. Why would I put capital here? It's interesting. So maybe I might bring up or rehash the issue of non-profit motivated work. So in other words, work like what I'm doing right now, which well, actually you could say that I might, like, since I'm planning on making a book out of it, I hope that I might receive monetary compensation, but it's not the purpose, it's not the end in itself, that's not the reason. That's just in my case, in my way of thinking, in my thought process, it's just a piece of the ongoing puzzle is receiving money and being able to utilize it, compensation for my work, so that I don't have to be up till 1 a.m. or after just to get some ideas out, and really have no time throughout the week, taking up responsibilities at home like I do leaves not always a lot of time in the evenings, as well as my research and fellowship, development of the church type stuff. That's usually a couple nights a week. Anyways, my point talking about capital is that, or one of the challenges of it is non-profit motivated work. So it's a matter of awareness, for one, awareness of your work. It's a matter of selection. Like this, it kind of has to prove itself or test itself somehow. And just sitting and not being interacted with, we know we're not doing something right in the project, so we have to keep working at it and becoming more concrete, working on relationships, etc. So that's relevance to SOTs. There's a note about, of course, what is the spectacle and or APS, speaking phenomenologically and not theoretically. So I just want to make a clear point when speaking about the spectacle and the APS, that I'm not trying to make a theory. I'm trying to convey a model which I have myself utilized to verify and notice isomorphisms between the model, the media expressions of the model, and my own perceptive cognitive processes. Okay, so yeah, that's quite a bit of still that I could speak to quite a bit more. Just to kind of broaden out this whole introduction scope, and not only that, but link into some more of the areas of which my library of books would connect in with later on when I process those. So that's the General Proximity Guild or Small Group Research, Alphabetica, with the Great Axial War, Cybernetics, Semiotics, and also of interest, of course, to Alphabetica. So yet another poke at another attempt at spectacle APS. Kind of concrete abstract relationship there, codependent arising between the two, and a model of such given for the purpose of trying it out phenomenologically. So I have more notes here about DEC protocol, which I think we have covered pretty much everything, except there's a note on context here for that. So it is a normal and natural thing to utilize externalized memory, and the purpose of this is to help to increase coherence in all various different areas of our behavior. We're doing this by keeping track of it, by modeling it, by bringing things which were not well understood into the light, and together practicing and sharing these models, and coming together and converging our databases, converging upon culture via selection, mimetic selection, as to what you hold in your database. So again, this is an agent-centric paradigm. So it's a natural thing to express, to create symbolic expression, and even to externalize your memory. I mean, there's a kind of an obvious priority or hierarchy there, that some things you couldn't forget them even if you wanted to because they're so important. So writing it down may be even redundant. But this is kind of all obvious fact. So we're all working on these database. We each having our own perspective on the database, and having various different areas of mastery, membership, participation, etc. In different areas, and we are sharing our expertise. We are mimetically selecting, and together we are creating a full, or we're attempting to create a complete human memone. So in other words, a kind of civilization level set, or society level set of behavior, of articulated protocols. And as with any externalization, though, we just have to always bear in mind that one great hideous pitfall of interpretation. When it spreads around, if it does, this is often the one common mistake that just always seems to happen. It's inevitable that mistakes are made until the patterns are realized, so therefore we have to expect this from participation. It's a fact, and again, this is the danger at this point of participation, is hypocrisy, because the difference between a participant and a member is that a participant can only go by law, by instruction. So can only try to logically and rationally execute and compute, interpret whatever the expression is. So the protocols or the programs in which a member or a master, more likely a master, but a member is fine, can be. Members are not able to offer as much guidance, obviously, but they can certainly pass along agreed upon standard instructions that make sense. These are the best of the best, cream of the crop. Of course, there will be varying in opinions, and you can always you can fork and have different protocols side by side, ready to be used, whichever you prefer. So yeah, this can't be overstated how important it is. The feedback observation tracking method is ongoing here, and this means that any of these instructions are provisional. They are provisional, so every instruction you ever read from any kind of a Bible or whatever, this is what this is saying, is that you may understand a literal reading of that instruction, and you may try to follow it out literally, but there are also much more deeper and fundamental insights to be gained as to why that is done the way it is. Even discipline, as we call it, I believe. Discipline. So the ability to no longer break the constraints. That's the sign of the next kind of stage. You have that ability. But in case of participation, you keep breaking constraints without realizing why, but you think that you're not because you're following the law, and the law tells you something, and you interpret it and try to figure out what is and is not breaching or breaking the law. And we'll notice many examples in our nature where we attempt to justify ourselves, justify our actions against the law, so that we feel like we are not guilty of the law, that we have not broken it. Okay. Anyways, well, I got pretty far. That's about it for tonight. That's all that I had on my card anyways, so there's a few more sections. I need to go a few areas towards SOTS, Alphabetica, small group, and I would call deck protocol pretty much done up tonight. Deck protocol, AO, dashboard, etc. So that's great. I can carry on. I need to get some rest right now. It's after 1. And rest is certainly an area of concern. Good night.